I was born in a post-Soviet country.
Mikhail Gorbachev finally stepped down as president of the Soviet Union tonight.
So when I talk about passports and relocation in a scenario of world war, I'm not doing it for the sake of fear-mongering. I just witnessed too many weird things with my own eyes, which made me approach everything with a bit of a prepper mentality. Most people in the West are just now starting to ask the questions that I've been asking my whole life. And today I'm giving you my real list, not the list that ranks passports by how many beach vacations you can take, but the list that answers a very different questions entirely. If a major conflict breaks out, which passport keeps you off the board? Because here's somebody nobody really talks about in the space. The passport that makes you powerful in a peacetime can make you a target in a wartime. And the ones that most people dismiss as weak, those are the ones that could save your life. So let's discuss. All over the internet, we see passport indexes. We also analyze immigration waves. We look at opportunities maps. But the peacetime game has completely different rules than the wartime game. And the people who don't consider this scenario face a very solid risk. So here is what the peacetime ranking measures. How many countries will let you in without a visa? That's it. That's the whole metric. Some will rarely take into consideration things like taxes and lifestyle. But here's what a wartime ranking has to measure. Which country is nobody fighting over? Which country won't draft you or your children? Which country won't sanction you or put your face on a list? Which country has a strategic asset that makes it a target? And which country government stays functional in a moment of a crisis? As you notice, these are completely different criteria, and when you run the numbers on those criteria, the ranking looks completely different. A US passport is one of the most powerful documents in human history in peacetime. In a hot conflict involving the United States, and you probably noticed each conflict involves the United States.
I'm gonna bomb the shit out of them. It's true.
Traveling on a US passport in certain regions becomes a safety risk, not an advantage. In some conflict zones, it may make you worth more as a hostage than as a traveler. Banks don't want to work with you, exit routes disappear, borders close, because we are in a crisis scenario and your passport is politically charged. And by no means I'm saying dump your US passport, that's not the point here. Dual citizenship exists for exactly this reason. You hold your home country document and you hold a second one that operates on a different geopolitical logic. The goal is optionality. So let me just give you the criteria I'm using for this list, and then I'll go through the actual list of countries. There's just 5 things that I'm looking for. 1. Military neutrality, either by constitution, by tradition, or by sheer strategic logic. Countries that have no army, aren't in giant military alliances, or have a documented history of sitting out major conflicts. This is what I'm looking for. Number 2, not in a hot region. Eastern Europe is out, too close to the current conflict. The Middle East is out. The South China Sea zone is out. I want countries that are geographically insulated from the hot zones. Number 3, not a US ally that gets pulled in easily. This eliminates most of NATO, 5 I countries, and a large chunk of the Pacific. So if your second country is in a formal mutual defense treaty with the US, you're probably not actually diversifying your risks. Obviously, lately the geopolitical dynamics have been switching, so you also have to kind of try and predict what sort of alignments might be molded over time. Let's move on to number 4. Small enough to not be a strategic target. Small countries that produce no strategic resources and have no military significance are, in wartime, the safest real estate on Earth. And number 5, functional enough to matter. A second passport from a completely failed state doesn't help you. Your country needs a working banking and a government that can actually represent you, issue documents, even in a moment of a crisis. So with this 5 criteria, here's my list. You probably expected that. Let's start with South America. Uruguay. Uruguay is the stability story. It's one of the most institutionally stable countries in Latin America. Quite strong rule of law, functioning judiciary, genuine democracy with peaceful transitions of power, and long track record of not getting involved in other people's conflicts. Uruguay is currently not in any military alliance. It's not in NATO, it's geographically deep in South America, insulated from every current conflict theater on Earth, and it offers one of the most genuinely livable quality of life experiences in the Western Hemisphere. Solid healthcare, good infrastructure, pretty good schools, English is spoken quite widely in cities like Montevideo. While there's no straight path to citizenship right now, their passports does get you into 150 countries visa-free, including the entire Schengen. Of course, Uruguay allows dual citizenship. And the taxes are currently quite interesting as they offer 0% tax on foreign source income for the first 11 years of residency. As everywhere in Latin America, it's pretty easy to get residency based on financial solvency and things like that. The path to citizenship gonna be also similar to other countries in the region, something like 5 years past to naturalization. So considering the country's generally worth living in, you might actually get there and get the passport later on. As I mentioned, their financial solvency programs are quite reasonable for residencies. One is based on investment, one is based on foreign income. Get yourself familiarized and find the immigration program that works for you. For families specifically, I think Uruguay is probably in top 3 options of this entire list. It's safe, it's livable, stable, quite affordable in comparison to Western Europe even. And if you're building towards a real passport over 5 years, that could be a good option. For next country, probably makes sense to follow up with Paraguay. Paraguay is the financial sovereignty play on this list, the country most optimized for people who care about tax structures, financial privacy, asset protection alongside of their geopolitical hedge. So territorial tax is at 0% on foreign income, no capital gains tax on assets held abroad, and importantly, Paraguay does not actively participate in the Common Reporting Standard, so the global financial reporting network that automatically shares your banking information with 100 plus governments. Paraguay is not part of that. They did recently come out with quite a weird reporting rule on every crypto transaction, but I'm honestly not sure how that can be enforced and how soon it's going to be demolished because of the ridicule of this entire rule. Just like Uruguay, Paraguay has a large variety of immigration programs that will allow you to get residency there, including your spouse, minor children. That's not going to be an issue at all. The honest trade-off is Paraguay is not Uruguay in terms of infrastructure and quality of life. Banking options are more limited than in Uruguay. Internet and services outside of capital can be somewhat spotty. You are able to build a solid lifestyle there. You would just have to put a lot more effort compared to some other nations on this list. In terms of checking all the boxes during the wartime game, no army of significance, no military alliances, deep South America, nowhere near any conceivable conflict theater. It is landlocked, so on one side, it's no strategic coastline or naval assets that make you interesting to anyone, but it does also limit your access to the coastal line as well in case you actually need to leave by water. Small economy, no critical resources, and most likely nobody's coming for Paraguay. Let's move a little north and touch on Central America. Costa Rica. Costa Rica has something no other countries on this list have: a constitutional ban on having an army. Not a policy, not a tradition, a constitutional provision written into law in 1949 that abolished the military entirely. President at the time literally walked into the army barracks and tore down a wall. That was basically the announcement. Since then, Costa Rica maintained a civil guard for domestic security and nothing else. No military, no NATO membership, no defense treaties. In 1983, the country formally declared itself permanently neutral. In 1994, that neutrality was reaffirmed once again. The US has historically respected it, which is significant given Costa Rica's geographical position in Central America. For a wartime passport, this is the story you want. A country that the international community has functionally agreed is off the table. So basically, nobody drafts Costa Rican into other people's wars. Nobody sanctions Costa Rica into a corner. The country has had the same neutral positioning through every major conflict of the last 75 years. The passport itself is quite strong, gets you into 150 plus countries visa-free, including, again, entire Schengen. So solid document. I wish I could say that Costa Rica has a citizenship by investment program, but that wouldn't be true. So again, it would be residency options, including things like pensionado, or based on your investments, based on your income, financial solvency, based on your money in a bank in Costa Rica. Again, they have a large variety of financial solvency-based programs that will get you to residency, get your entire family, minor dependent, spouse, to be able to reside in the country and have the residency permit that is renewable. And then if you actually get to spend time in Costa Rica, maybe you will be able to reach the naturalization requirements. Since we're already in Central America, I must mention El Salvador. You probably heard me talk about El Salvador before. I'm as bullish as it gets. In El Salvador, they recently claimed an amazing title of being the safest country in the Western Hemisphere. This is quite amazing given the country's prior history. It's also been said that El Salvador is the first country out of forced turning. The way I see it, over the last 40 years, their currency devalued itself out of existence, which put them on a US dollar standard without access to money printer. They were one of the most dangerous countries on the planet. It was basically a failed state. They hit the rock bottom before others did, and then they went for the most drastic and the most amazing changes our world has seen through our lifetime, at least. They made Bitcoin a legal tender, they put all the criminals in jail, and they transformed the country entirely. And it has proven to be a major magnet for foreigners relocating to El Salvador full-time and building their life there. And I personally would consider it one of the most likely Plan B locations for my family. The honest caveat, both Costa Rica and El Salvador are in Central America. The US has significant influence in that region. The country is not completely outside the American geopolitical sphere, but far enough to not be pulled easily. Let's move on to the next country. And this one is gonna surprise many people. It is Serbia. I understand that it might break some of my checkpoints that I mentioned early in the video, because Serbia is clearly geographically positioned very close to the current conflict. But here are some things that make Serbia unique. The Serbian passport gets you visa-free access to Schengen, Russia, and China. This is an extremely short list of countries whose citizens can't do that. In a World War scenario where the world fractures into blocks like a Western bloc, Russian bloc, Chinese bloc, most passports are going to get you locked into one of the camps and locked out of another. So the Serbian passport was kind of designed through 40 years of this Yugoslav non-aligned diplomacy to work in all of them. Yugoslavia was literally the founding country of the non-aligned movement, and at the time, the president built an entire foreign policy around refusing to belong to either the American or Soviet camp. So that diplomatic legacy is baked into Serbia's relationship with essentially every country on the earth. So in 2026, Serbia has good historical relations with Russia. It also has EU candidacy status, and it has maintained ties with China. So in a world that is actively deglobalizing into competing blocs, that positioning is quite extraordinary. Serbia is not in NATO. It has declared military neutrality. The government has resisted EU pressure to sanction Russia. And considering Serbia is part of the Schengen but not part of the EU, it comes with all the perks of a strong passport, yet not having the disadvantage of being part of the EU, such as shared tax ledger and common reporting policy. The geographical risk is worth noticing because it is very close to Eastern European conflict. But again, we have to separate the residency and the passport. So Serbian passport comes with all those great perks that I previously mentioned, with all these relationships with every potential bloc of the world. But the residency in Serbia could be a geographical risk in terms of being too close to the Eastern European conflict. So for a second passport, with extraordinary diplomatic access across all geopolitical blocs that will potentially form, Serbia is very hard to beat. All right, I think it's time to move to Africa. São Tomé and Príncipe. Very simple explanation. Speed, price, geographical location. I don't see a scenario in which an island nation on the west coast of Africa would be pulled into a conflict. It is one of the fastest citizenship by investment programs in the world. If you're watching this video because you are worried about escalating geopolitical risk right now, and you don't have a second passport, well, São Tomé will probably solve it for you. $105,000 for a single applicant, $111,000 for a family of 4, simple non-refundable donation into government fund, no residency requirements, 100% remote process. Now, the honest caveats, because I'm not going to pitch it Without them, São Tomé is not a strong passport travel-wise. You will need a visa basically anytime you travel, and you're probably not going to want to leave in São Tomé either. It's beautiful and genuinely remote, but most people simply using this program just for getting them a second passport, not relocating. Wartime positioning? Perfect. No strategic assets, nobody's fighting over São Tomé. If the world is dividing into hostile blocks and you need a document that crosses borders without political baggage, this is as clean as it gets. Basically use this as the emergency option or as the bridge document while you're building towards something with a longer track record. Okay, next one is going to be really interesting. Turkey. Turkey was always exciting to me in terms of geopolitical hedging. Turkey definitely belongs on this list, but with a very detailed explanation because Turkey is quite complicated and I'm not going to oversimplify it. Turkey is technically in NATO, and this is the main argument against it for a wartime passport. If NATO goes to war, Turkey's formal obligation is to participate. So why am I including it? Because Turkey has spent the last decade demonstrating with quite considerable success that it operates by its own logic within NATO. Turkey blocked Swedish and Finnish NATO accession for nearly 2 years. Turkey refused to impose sanctions on Russia throughout the entire Ukraine war. Turkey has $60 billion in annual trade with Russia. And Turkey was the one hosting the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. So President Erdogan is playing a different game with the rest of NATO. His survival strategy depends on maintaining relationships on all sides, and Turkey has consistently prioritized its own interests over alliance obligations when those obligations became inconvenient. In a major conflict, I would expect Turkey to continue doing exactly that, finding a way to kind of mediate, extract value from both sides, and avoid the worst of fighting. Turkey also has a citizenship by investment program that I find very interesting because it's the only real estate-based citizenship program that I would actually recommend. In most other jurisdictions, real estate investment looks like a true capital anchor that you will have a hard time to get rid of. In Turkey, you actually buy off of a free market. You have to spend $400,000 on real estate, hold it only for 3 years, and you right away get the citizenship. It takes about 9 to 10 months now to actually get the passport in your hands. So it's a very interesting citizenship by investment program too. The geographical, geopolitical position is real. Turkey sits between Europe and Asia, has a coastline on the Black Sea and Mediterranean, and has relationship across every bloc. In the World War scenario, that makes Turkey potentially the most useful diplomatic safe haven, but also a country all sides kind of need to keep functional. Obviously, the risk. If the conflict escalates to the point where NATO unity is forced, Turkey's freedom of maneuver really narrows. I would put this one in the portfolio, but not as your primary flag. Now that we got through this list, how do you build your passport portfolio from here? The most protected position is to hold 2-3 of this list alongside your primary passport because each one kind of solves a different program's hedges against different attack vectors and threat. São Tomé and Príncipe solves the speed. If you need a second passport very soon, that's a good option. Costa Rica and Uruguay solve the long-term neutrality problem as well as a very cool lifestyle to build for you and your family. Serbia solves the multi-block access problem. If your life or business requires moving around between all these different new alliances, new power dynamics, Serbia is a very good option. Turkey may solve a geopolitical bridge problem, but again, you need to consider other risks that come with that. The people who come out of a major geopolitical disruption with their wealth and freedom intact are not the ones who had the most powerful single passport. They're the ones who built a structure across multiple jurisdictions before the crisis arrived. They're the ones who had access to a safe jurisdiction in a moment of crisis. They're the ones who held capital in self-custody outside of any government promises. So passport portfolio and Bitcoin is what individual sovereignty actually looks like in 2026. If you want to figure out which of these flags actually apply to your situation, your citizenship, your potential ancestry claims, your asset base, your lifestyle, your desired lifestyle for your kids. This is exactly what we do at CitizenX. So go create an account at citizenx.com and you will be able to schedule a free consultancy call with me to brainstorm together on which of these flags are the best for you and your family. The link is in description. Please make sure to follow us on YouTube as well as Twitter. We are CitizenX on Twitter. I myself is Plan B Passport on Twitter as well. Subscribe and make sure to not miss out on all this individual sovereignty content. Thank you for watching this video.